They still talk about that night in Dry Willow, long after the wind swept her tracks from the sand. A woman, cloaked in dust and silence, rode in under the weight of moonlight, with a bundle in her arms and the look of someone who'd buried mercy miles behind her. Midnight had long passed, and the town, stitched together with creaking porches and guttering lanterns, had gone mostly quiet, except for the saloon. It spilled yellow light and drunk laughter into the street, and the sound of Jeb Creighton's voice rolled out like a curse no one dared answer. The woman dismounted without a word. Her horse, lean and silent, stood still as she adjusted the infant cradle to her chest. Wrapped in a threadbare blue blanket, the child made not a sound. She stepped through the swinging doors like she'd done it 100 times, but no one recognized her face, not yet. Inside, the smoke hung thick, curling in lazy spirals toward the ceiling fans that hadn't turned in years. Cards slapped tables, glasses clinked, and women with tired eyes lingered near men with faster hands than honor. At the back, lounging like a snake fat off stolen eggs, sat Creighton, greasy hair, wide hat, and a belt too heavy with iron. His boots rested on the table, and he was laughing at a joke one of his boys barely finished telling. She walked past them all, slow, steady, not hiding but not needing to be seen, until she reached his table. The baby stirred as she stepped into the light, and conversations hiccuped, then stopped altogether. Creighton lifted his gaze, saw the woman, and grinned like a man offered a second bottle. "Ma'am," he said, sitting up, "you sure you got the right place? This ain't no church, and I'm no kind of savior." "You don't know me," she said, her voice carrying just enough to hush the last whispers. "But he's yours." And with that, she laid the baby on the table, right atop the scatter of cards and coins, then pulled back her cloak. Dust fell from the folds like ash. Beneath, she wore worn denim, a gun belt low on her hips, and a holstered six-shooter that looked more like judgment than protection. Creighton blinked, laughter draining from his face. "What kind of joke?" "It's not a joke." The baby stirred again, one small fist unwrapping from the blanket. The silence held, hard and taut, until one of Creighton's men, a wiry runt called Sykes, let out a bark of laughter. "She's crazy," he said. "Jeb don't have kids. Least, none he's lived to know about." That's when her eyes met Sykes's, and he stopped laughing. She hadn't moved, hadn't even touched her gun, but something in her stare cut straight through to whatever rotten root kept him upright. A voice near the piano whispered, "Wait, ain't that Alara Kane?" Heads turned. Someone scoffed. "No, Alara died. Sheriff's girl. Caught in that raid outside Bitter Creek." She didn't respond. Her eyes were still on Creighton, who now leaned forward, trying to piece together a memory he hoped had drowned in whiskey. The years hadn't dulled her face entirely, just sharpened it. There were scars now, one along the jaw, another by her hairline. Her hands, once soft, bore the calluses of hard travel and harder choices. Creighton's brow furrowed. "Kane, you left me for dead," she said, 5 years ago, on a night not unlike this one. "You and your boys thought the fire would cover it all. You were wrong." He opened his mouth, closed it. The room stayed frozen. Somewhere outside, a coyote howled like it had heard something final. "I didn't come to beg," she went on, voice calm but heavy as a church bell. "I came to give you this child, and a truth you can't drink away." Creighton stood now, arms out to the side. "Even if I did know you, what makes you think I'd claim that thing?" "Because he carries your eyes," she said, without looking down. "And because I want you to see what you left behind. I want you to live with him in your shadow." "You want me to raise him?" He spat. "No, I want you to know he exists. That's all." Creighton stared at the child, who blinked slowly, unaware of the storm his existence stirred. His lips curled. "And if I don't care?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked around the room, at the men who'd killed and looted beside him, at the townsfolk too afraid to lift their heads. Then she leaned in slightly, her voice dropping just enough. "You don't have to care, Jeb, but after tonight, you'll remember." Then she turned, left the baby on the table, walked back through the stunned silence and into the cool wind of midnight. The door swung behind her like the ticking hands of a pocket watch, marking the moment something inevitable had been set in motion. Creighton stared down at the baby, jaw tight, eyes haunted, and Dry Willow held its breath. 5 years before that night in Dry Willow, Elara Kane stood barefoot in the ashes of her life. Her father, Sheriff Thomas Kane, had been gunned down in the street, defending a town too spineless to remember his name a week later. Her husband, Daniel, had died with a hoe in his hand, trying to protect their homestead against men who brought rifles and fire. And she had been dragged behind a barn and left in the dirt with blood in her mouth, and nothing left to pray to. Jeb Creighton's gang didn't just raid for cattle or coin. They left ruin behind them like wildfire leaves smoke. No laws followed. No posse gave chase. Bitter Creek was too far from anywhere and too scared to speak up. The gang vanished into the canyons, and Elara was counted among the dead. But she didn't die. Not then. A half-blind Comanche elder named Nwoka found her days later, limp and half-mad, clinging to life beneath the roots of a fallen tree. He had no tribe left, no family. What he had was knowledge of the land and a silence so deep it swallowed pain whole. He took her to a hollowed cave above the great red bluff, fed her root broth, and watched as she clawed her way back to something like living. She didn't speak for weeks. When she finally did, her voice was gravel. "I want to kill the one who did this." Nwoka didn't flinch. "Then you must learn how to live first." Over the next year, she lived harder than she ever had before. Her fingers bled from flint and rawhide. She learned how to track by shadow, how to drink from stone crevices, how to throw a knife from a crawl, how to kill a snake without noise. And somewhere between the summer winds and winter silence, her belly began to swell. The child came on a cold morning, born into the world as a scream beneath canyon sky. She named him Isaac. He was small, dark-eyed, and calm in a way that frightened her. He almost never cried, just watched the world with a stare far older than he should have had. Nwoka said he had the eyes of a spirit come back to finish what he'd started. Elara raised him in the wild. There were no lullabies, only the whisper of wind through pine. He crawled across rock and slept with the scent of sage on his skin. When he could walk, she taught him to step where she stepped. When he could speak, she taught him silence. And as he grew, so did the fire in her chest. She kept a map in her mind, each name, each face. Creighton, Sykes, Levi the Red, Big Jack. She marked every rumor, every town they touched, every place they left a woman bruised or a family burned out. She waited, not for revenge. That wasn't the shape of it. She waited until Isaac no longer needed her, for every breath. Until she could leave him in safe hands, should she not return. 2 winters ago, she started testing their edges. A wagon of rifles vanished from one of their stash camps. A hideout in Lone Mesa caught fire, with 2 men inside. Another outlaw was found gut-shot outside of Rio Gap, mumbling her name before the light left his eyes. She wore no badge, but justice wore her face now. Then came the whisper. Creighton had taken Dry Willow. Not with fire, this time. With fear. He and his gang had swaggered in one night, and claimed it like a poker pot, and the town bent under the weight of his voice. Elara packed light. She brought Isaac. She didn't plan to stay long. Back in the saloon, Creighton stared at the baby like it was a ticking device set to blow his world apart. He didn't touch him. Didn't dare. Isaac, though, watched Creighton with quiet stillness, like he knew something the outlaw didn't. "Why now?" Creighton had asked, voice hollow. "Why bring him to me after all this time?" Elara had already turned by then, because a child deserves to see what kind of man his father really is. The truth wasn't meant to be accepted. It was meant to haunt. Later that night, after she left the saloon, Elara brought Isaac to the old chapel behind the blacksmith's yard. No one had used it for sermons in years. The roof leaked. The benches were warped, but the bell still hung, and the cross still cast a shadow. She rocked Isaac slowly, whispering to him in the language Nwoka taught her, a tongue older than the towns that had forgotten what justice meant. He looked up at her, calm, eyes unblinking. "You were never meant to be a weapon," she murmured, "but you were born in the fire, and if that fire follows you, you'll know where it came from." From the alley, a boy watched her. Young, dirty-faced, no more than 10. He'd seen her in the saloon. Word had already spread. The woman with the baby. The woman who faced Creighton and didn't flinch. He stepped closer. "Ma'am." Ilera turned slowly. "I saw what you did. You really gonna leave him with that man?" "No." The boy nodded like he understood, though he didn't. "They say Creighton's mad. He's drinking hard now. Punched one of his own boys. He's scared." "He should be," she said, not unkindly. The boy hesitated. "What happens next?" Ilera looked toward the center of town, where laughter had died and fear had started to whisper in cracks it couldn't fill. "Next," she said softly, "they remember who this town used to belong to, before men like him made folks forget." The boy didn't understand that either, but he stayed, just a moment longer, because something in her tone said the story wasn't over. She placed Isaac in a cradle she'd built from cedar and twine, kissed his brow, then stood and tied the gun belt tighter across her waist. Outside, the stars were out, quiet and countless. The kind of sky you only got after blood had been spilled and truth had been spoken. And somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied. Justice was already riding. By the next evening, Dry Willow wasn't breathing right. Shutters were drawn tighter than usual. Children were kept indoors, and the few men who usually lingered on porches with pipes and idle talk had taken to watching the horizon instead. Fear had returned to the town's bones, but this time, it wasn't Creighton's name that stirred it. It was hers. The woman who walked into the saloon with a baby and left behind a reckoning. Creighton hadn't left his room upstairs. Not once. Rumor was he'd been staring at the child all night, drinking in silence. When Levi the Red tried to take the boy from the table to give him rest, Creighton pulled iron and warned him off. "Don't touch him," he growled slurred. "She said he's mine. He stays." The gang murmured but obeyed. They had seen fear before. They had worn it like armor. But something about the way Creighton's hands trembled around the bottle now. It unsettled even the worst of them. Sykes, meaner than most and stupider than all, finally broke the silence. "You gonna let some ghost of a girl bring this on your head?" he asked. "She's one woman." "No," said Creighton, eyes fixed on the child. "She's something else now." That night, the lamplights burned longer than usual. The streets shimmered under the soft glow, casting halos on cracked boards and broken hopes. A few brave, or foolish, townsfolk gathered by the well, whispering about what might come. "She's back for blood," said old Lena Hobbs, who ran the dry goods store. "Saw her once when she was Sheriff Kane's girl. Used to smile like summer wind. That smile's long gone." "She's got the Kane blood," murmured another, "and the look of someone who ain't gonna miss." "She can't do it alone," a man said. "There's 5 of them, all killers. She only needs 1 bullet for each." At the stroke of 9, the church bell rang once. No one had touched it in years. The sound rolled across the street like a warning, low and slow. Windows closed. Voices hushed. And in the saloon, Creighton finally stood. "She's calling us out." Levi shifted uneasily. "We don't gotta play by her rules, boss. We ride now. Take her out before she gets close." Creighton shook his head. "She's already here. And running just means you die tired." He strapped on his revolvers, both loaded, both worn smooth from years of sin. He looked at Isaac, still silent, still watching, and for a fleeting second, something like guilt passed over his face. "Take him upstairs," Creighton said, "and pray you don't hear gunfire." Down the block, near the edge of the livery stable, Ilera stood beneath the lamplight with her hat pulled low and her coat pinned back. The revolver at her hip gleamed silver beneath the glow. She didn't move, didn't blink. Her presence alone split the night, like lightning waiting for thunder. The outlaws stepped from the saloon one by one, slower than usual. Each of them had seen death before. But this, it didn't feel like a gunfight. It felt like judgment. Creighton came last, coat swinging like a preacher's robes. He stopped 10 paces from her, hands low, eyes higher. "Why now?" he asked. "You could have killed me in my sleep. Could have shot me when my back was turned." "I want you awake," Ilera said, her voice steady as stone. "Want you to know who's ending you. Want your men to see it and carry the story." Creighton nodded once. "This town's not yours. It never was. But it doesn't belong to you either. Not anymore. Sykes shifted behind Creighton, his hand twitching near his gun. I wouldn't, Alara said without turning. I've already counted the shots. Creighton gave a dry laugh. You think you're some kind of ghost, back from the dirt? No, she said. I'm something worse. I remember. With that, she drew. Her revolver barked once. Sykes dropped before his fingers found steel. Another shot, and Levi screamed, falling back with blood spreading across his chest. The two remaining outlaws dove for cover, one firing wildly, the other scrambling into the alley. Creighton held his ground, eyes wide. You taught me something, Alara said, walking slowly now, each step deliberate, that the law only matters when it's enforced. That fear builds empires faster than words. And you thought you'd buried me beneath both. He fired. The bullet tore her coat, nicked her side, but she didn't slow. Her return shot hit his thigh. He staggered, cursed, fell to one knee. Another gunman popped from behind a barrel, firing twice. Alara spun, fired once, and the man folded like wet cloth. The alley fell silent again. Creighton tried to rise, legs shaking. You think you're doing justice, he hissed. No, she said. Justice would have come 5 years ago. This is what's left when it's too late. She stood over him now, revolver aimed, breath measured. Creighton looked up, blood in his teeth. What about the boy? He'll know the truth, that his father was a coward who burned homes and ran from his own blood, and that his mother came back to finish what was started. He grinned, even then. He'll hate you. He might, she said, but he'll never fear you. She lowered the barrel. Get out, she said. Crawl if you have to. But you don't stay in Dry Willow. You don't look for us. You don't breathe near a town with a child in it again. If I ever hear your name whispered in any place where decent folks still live, I finish it. Creighton spat blood. You won't always be faster. I only need to be once. He limped away, dragging his leg, leaving behind a trail of blood and silence. Alara turned to the town. People had gathered now. Not many, but enough. Faces peering from behind doors. Eyes wide. Some in awe. Some in fear. She holstered her gun and stepped past the corpses, without flinching. The night wind picked up, carrying the scent of gunpowder and resolution. From the chapel, a cry rose. Isaac awake now. She followed it. Behind her, Dry Willow stood still. And for the first time in years, not a soul dared challenge the quiet. The boy stood on the ridge where the canyon opened wide, the wind tugging at his coat. Dry Willow lay behind him, quiet and silvered in the dawn, while before him, the sandstone cliffs stretched endlessly into the horizon. He was 10 now, old enough to ride alone, old enough to ask questions, the kind that made Alara quiet for hours. She stood beside him, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder, the other gripping the reins of her mare. Time had weathered her, lines at the eyes, hair streaked with dust and gray, but her presence remained unshaken, like the cliffs, like the wind that never stopped. Isaac squinted into the sun. Is this where you left him? Alara nodded. Somewhere out there. They had ridden out before first light, just the two of them. No townfolk watching, no questions from the new sheriff or the preacher's wife. The road was theirs, as it had been once before. But this time, the ride held no vengeance, only reckoning. Why didn't you kill him? Isaac asked, not for the first time. Alara looked to the canyon edge, where stone dropped to shadow. Because death doesn't teach. But fear, it lingers. If he's still breathing, he knows what waits should he step wrong again. Isaac was quiet, then asked, Was he ever good? No, she said it without bitterness. He was charming. That's different. He turned the word over in his mouth, unsure what to do with it. Alara reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a bundle wrapped in oiled cloth. She knelt beside him and unwrapped it with care. Inside lay a revolver, cleaned, oiled, and used. This was your grandfather's, she said. Sheriff Kane. It kept peace in Dry Willow longer than most men live. Isaac ran a finger over the grip, reverent. He was a real lawman, wasn't he? She nodded. The kind who didn't need to shoot to be heard. And you? I wasn't built for law, she said. her voice like gravel warmed by sunlight. But I was built to protect what's mine. He looked at her, eyes full of something between awe and fear. Am I yours? She didn't flinch. You always will be. He held the revolver with both hands, not yet lifting it, just feeling the weight. Will I need it? One day. Maybe not for a man like Creighton, but for something else. Something that doesn't care where you came from or who raised you. This land tests people, makes them choose what they'll stand for. A hawk circled overhead, casting a swift-moving shadow over the ridge. Isaac followed its arc with his eyes. Sometimes, she said, I think about leaving. His head snapped toward her. You'd leave Dry Willow. No, she said, smiling faintly. I mean leaving all of it, the stories, the past. Letting it fade. Letting folks forget the girl who rode at midnight. But they talk about you. They talk, she agreed. But not always true. Legends grow faster than crops out here. And they don't leave room for mistakes. He looked at her, considering. I don't want to forget. I want to remember everything. She placed a hand over his heart. Then remember what mattered. Not just who drew faster, or who fell. Remember why we stood in the first place. The canyon wind rose, warm and dry, whistling between the stone towers, like voices long buried. Isaac closed his eyes against the gust, and for a moment, he imagined he could hear footsteps in the echoes. Men shouting. A gunshot. A baby's cry. He opened his eyes and found only Alara. Solid. Watching. Will I be like you? He asked. No, she said. You'll be better. They stayed until the sun rose full, baking the cliffs in gold. Then she took the revolver, wrapped it again, and strapped it back behind the saddle. There would be time for that later. On the ride back, Isaac asked no more questions. The town was stirring when they reached it, wagons creaking to life, smoke rising from chimneys. Dry Willow had healed in slow, quiet ways, but it still bore the shape of what it survived. Some buildings remained scorched. Some names had gone unspoken. Alara led the mare through the square, nodding to the blacksmith, tipping her hat to Lena Hobbs. These people didn't look at her like they used to. Not with fear. Not even reverence. Just respect, the quiet, enduring kind earned by standing your ground when everything else burns. Isaac slid off the horse and followed her into the little house behind the church. Their home. It wasn't much, 3 rooms and a stove that never behaved, but it was theirs. That night, as coyotes howled beyond the hills, Alara stood by the window with a rifle across her arms. Not because she expected danger, just because old habits were slow to leave. Behind her, Isaac lay asleep, his chest rising and falling like steady thunder. She whispered a name she hadn't spoken in years, Creighton. Not with hate, not even warning, just to remind herself of the shape the past once took, and how far they'd come since she first faced it down under the lamplight. And outside, the canyon wind whistled through the hills, carrying with it a story that would outlast them both.